So Dwayne, we were talking about this before. You know, in AVS, everybody's going crazy about the raised blacks on HDR and Dolby Vision.
Do the updates.
Now, I know, we spoke to LG, and LG was able to reproduce the raised blacks on the Dolby Vision, and from what I understand, that's being addressed, and that will definitely be addressed. Again, it's not if. So we know that, and also we know that when we calibrated the CX, at least when I calibrated the CX, I think it did the same with the with CalMan, that in Dolby Vision, that although it corrected some, improved the near black problem in Dolby Vision, if you start measuring the really low IREs, they still were higher than they should be, right? And so that's going to be fixed. But now, for the last couple of years on the LG, people were complaining about the raised blacks in HDR, right? And, I think Tyler Pruitt was commenting on AVS that it may be because the LUT's not loading properly, because every time you touch the 1D LUT on the HDR, it causes this. If you don't use touch the HDR 1D LUT, right, it's fine, right? So, so this gentleman here, Brian, I guess, who's Shane's colleague, had a question about, do you really think that LG is going to fix this HDR raised black problem, or do you think we're going to be having this forever?
Well, the question, D Nice, big fan, my friend. A lot of consumers are concerned about updating the firmware update on the CX. They're afraid of having raised blacks, so there's a lot of that going around. My question to you is, should they hold off on updating if they're not going to calibrate?
Good question. From what I have seen and measured, because I do try to measure with the samples that I have here, every single time a firmware update comes out, does it impact a calibration? From what I can see so far, in 99% of the cases, it does not. There have been an instance or two where a firmware did break the calibration.
But
Now, having said that, so having said that, the raised blacks in both HDR and Dolby Vision on the LG displays, because it's not just this current 2020 generation that's an issue. This has been going on for the past two generations, so the 2018s and the 2019s.
Right.
Again, when you look at PQ and how it's supposed to be set up, there's supposed to be a clipping at the bottom end and the top end. So, in most cases where people are noticing these raised blacks, it does have to deal with modifying the 1D LUT via calibration. So, I'm only going to assume that when you're modifying the 1D LUT, the program to measure this stuff is not accounting correctly for the clipping area on the low end, which, again, I'm just assuming here. I don't actually know, but there are ways around it. One of them is just don't mess with the 1D LUT.
Yeah, which a lot of people are not doing, right?
Exactly. Just don't mess with it.
Yep.
You can actually just manually calibrate the grayscale, and you don't have this problem.
So for the average person, should you, for the average consumer, D-Nice, would you say to not update their display upon opening it, or is that update? I understand what you're saying about breaking calibration, but for the average person, would you recommend they do not update their display out of box?
No, they can update their display with the firmware. The firmware is not the problem. They're fine with upgrading their actual firmware.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because really what Dwayne's trying to explain, and we just try to restate it, is that the problem you have is when you try to recreate the 1D LUT and load it. And that's when it's occurring. And that's why we're not really sure why that's happening. I think that's why Tyler Pruitt said maybe it's not loading properly. I don't know. But the point is that's something for LG to figure out. But the bottom line is the way around it is not to replace the 1D LUT in HDR and either manually calibrate the grayscale or calibrate the set the white point in the service menu. It's a whole bunch of different ways you could do it. Each set's different, depending how bad or good it is. But as long as you don't touch the 1D LUT, you're fine. And there's nothing to do with firmware. You can update your firmware, and I probably suggest you do, because most of the time, at least, they're correct. At least LG, in my mind, over the history, usually improves their, the sets with the firmware. They actively work on these problems, believe it or not, and I've seen good results from the firmware updates on LG's side. Now the question really is, do they ever fix everything all the 100% all the time? Well, that's up for discussion. Usually that doesn't always happen, right? But they are conscientious, and they do see this, either from AVS or calls to the support center or whatever, and they do pay attention to a lot of this. So, all right.
Yeah, and just to add on to what you just said, John, don't mess with the 1D LED on both HDR and Dolby Vision. Just
Right.
leave them alone.
Right.